because we keep these briefings very tight and as concise as possible, because we know everybody has kind of a crazy schedule today, and certainly everybody is done with screen time. So thank you very much for joining me today. My name is Marianne Snow. I am the CEO of Sophaya, one of our sponsors for today's briefing, as well as the Remote Nation Institute, which is another sponsor for this event. We're doing Friday briefings every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we're doing that on purpose because this is a pretty unprecedented time. And our focus at Sophaya is remote work. And so because we engage in remote work as part of our profession, and we have a lot of expertise in this area, we know that there are many people out there who have found themselves in a pretty unprecedented circumstance, and they're engaging in something that is pretty extraordinary. It's not remote work. It's more work from home crisis situation and enforced isolation. And because we have a lot of expertise in this area, we thought it was very important that we make ourselves available so that you have an opportunity to get the benefit of the experience that we are sharing, not only with our clients, but with the world at large. So we're making these public forums so that we can make sure that people have the support they need in this very difficult time. We are using Microsoft Teams as our platform, and the reason we're doing that is, one, Microsoft has been a big supportive partner of ours, but in addition to that, we also want folks to have as much practice as possible with as many video platforms as possible, because we think it gives you a professional edge. And for many organizations that are Microsoft Office 365 shops, Teams is an integrated part of that platform. So the more exposure we can get you, the better. So I'm going to go through and do some prepared remarks on today's topic. And then after those prepared remarks, I'm going to open it up to the group for questions. So without further ado, what I'll be doing now is I'm just going to share my screen, pull up some slides just so that we've got something to really kind of give you guide on, and it will give me a chance to really kind of talk about today's topic, which is, how do you create visibility in these circumstances in the days that we're living with? And we think that that's an important component, particularly nowadays, because people are really feeling like they are in a little bit of a vacuum. And so I want to talk a little bit about that and tell you what kind of advice we're giving our clients, and also some of the situations that we're seeing with a typical organization that is really engaging in this emergency workplace shutdown, work from home, be in isolation circumstance. So today's topic is elevating your remote team and making them visible within your organization. And I want to be really clear about the fact that, what we're dealing with now is not, it's not remote work. It is really more of a crisis situation. But the techniques that we're going to talk to you about are things that we definitely teach our clients to use when they're using remote work as a business strategy. But we also just are working with our crisis clients right now just to make sure that they themselves are thinking about how they maintain visibility within their organizations, because that's a pretty crucial thing right at this moment. And we'll talk more about why in just a second. So I'm going to focus on just a couple of things today, mostly because I want to set the stage for your questions. And so once we go through the prepared remarks, I'm very interested to hear about your situation, and if there's something that we could provide you in terms of advice that will be really helpful to you. So for today's discussion, I want to talk about why visibility is really important in remote teams, but why it's particularly important in today's circumstances because of some of the things that are happening in the world today, and just the level of fatigue we're seeing, the level of anxiety we're seeing, and just the level of disorientation that we're seeing in the majority of organizations that we work with. Now, what's your role as a team advocate? And this is an important concept, because if you're managing or leading remote teams, then often you are in a rarefied position. And we'll want to talk a little bit about why that's important and how you can capitalize that. Why networks are a very crucial part of remote team leadership, and particularly right now, why it's going to be a real benefit to you and your team if you have done the work beforehand to have networks. Now, how do you leverage them? How do you take advantage of them? And why that's important to identify opportunities both internally and externally, because there's a lot of unknowns right now. And so you might have to leverage opportunities in both those sectors, because a lot of people just don't know what's going to happen next. It's a really interesting dynamic that we're seeing with all of our clients, all the organizations we work with, folks in our network, our contacts, and the individual conversations that we're having. And we've certainly in these forums had very clear discussions about how this is a chaotic and really kind of a crazy time period, and how people are feeling incredibly disoriented. But I would also, really kind of talk about the fact that we're working in the dark these days. People are feeling isolated. They're very much feeling out of control. We're not sure what's going to happen. There's a lot of divisiveness in the public discussions that are happening at this moment. Do we open up? Don't we open up? Is it safe? Isn't it safe? They're worried about the future. They're unsure anyone remembers they exist. And they're very anxious about what's coming next. And so making sure that there's a lot of communication flow, and we've talked about this before, communication to your people as well as communication up to the organization is a critical part of eliminating some of that stress. And the more that your senior leadership in your organizations, the more that folks are very clear about the value your team brings, then the more security you're going to add to your team's future, because companies are holding on to the individuals and the team units that they're deeming business critical. And so the more you can demonstrate that for folks, the better off you're going to be. This is a really important concept, because whether we are comfortable with this notion or not, the old life that we knew before COVID, and we were having a lot of conversations with people in this week, particularly because of the fact that we have states, different places in the United States and different parts of the world that are starting to relax their social distancing guidelines, and they are reopening parts of their business economy. When people get really anxious because they are business owners or they're organizational leaders, and they're trying to determine how they can save their companies, because obviously we can't stay locked down forever, because the entire world will be out of business. And so how do you balance that? But, in these moments, as things start to relax and things start to get to the next phase of this, appreciate that many people are trying to say to themselves, when this change occurs, what's the opportunity that's available for us? And if you own a business, what you're thinking about is, are there new lines of business? Are there new products? Are there new relationships? Are there new expertise we can apply? If you're within a company, there are going to be new projects that didn't exist before, where we have banking clients that are assisting the SBA, the Small Business Administration, with the PPP programs and some of the other stimulus programs. We have healthcare organizations that are saying, wow, we have to reimagine how we're going to deliver care in the clinical setting if we've got somebody coming in for a routine exam. We've got manufacturers who are really kind of thinking about it. We have folks from every segment you could possibly imagine, retail, sales, and they're trying to think about, what do they have to do to get ready to be able to do an opening responsibly, and really kind of think about ways that they can position themselves so that they can maintain the safety of their employees, the people that they serve, as well as, just mitigate business risk, because nobody wants to be ground zero for another uptick in the outbreak. And so, what are some of the new projects associated with that? What are some of the new roles that we're going to see evolving? And what are some of the new business opportunities? And so, opening those discussions and really kind of thinking about this, keeping, if you're a virtual team leader, a remote team leader, how are you keeping your ears to the ground? And, part of that has to be your capacity to be able to elevate the visibility of your team and your team's capabilities and willingness to participate within your organization. Because organizations at this moment are evaluating based on perceived value. And they're doing that against, what do we need to do to be able to maintain the organization? What's business critical? Who is going to contribute the most, and who's going to do it in as cost effectively as possible, and who can accommodate change? And so if you are leading a team of folks and you have not been successful in creating perceived value for yourself and your group, whether it's their strengths, their expertise, their capacity to roll up their sleeves and help in different ways, their versatility, their contribution in other areas and other sectors, what is it that you have that's unique to yourself, the people that you're working with, that you can absolutely present within your organization, to your customer base, to your colleagues, to strategic partners that you have, that will clearly demonstrate that you have momentum, that you're ready to go, and you're prepared. If you're invisible these days, you're expendable. And that's an important concept, folks. And it's something that we absolutely think about in a normal remote work situation. It's important to gain visibility, because you want to, if you have ambition, if you have people on your team that have ambition, then you want them to get credit, but you want them to be able to move forward. But today, in today's environment, it's even more critical, because if you're invisible, then it's easy to cut you, and that's a problem. You know your role as a team advocate, and this really kind of translates to three areas that we focus on when we're advising our clients, and we're helping them to prepare their leaders to be great advocates for their team. First of all, as a leader, you're going to have access to things that an average person within your team may not have access to, whether that's, meetings, whether that's information, whether it's a report, whether it's a relationship, whether it's, access to senior leaders, more resources, more expertise. Maybe you're in a professional organization that somebody else isn't in. But access equals information, and information gives you an advantage because it gives you things ahead of time that help you to plan. And it's up to you to be the voice in the room for your team. How are you leveraging this access? How are you working your networks? How are you leveraging your relationships? How are you doing research by having those conversations? We're having conversations every single day. And then all the things we learn from across all of the industries, we're actually mind sharing with all of our clients so that whatever we know, we're sharing with other folks, even though it might be a different industry, might be a different type of organization that's compiled a little differently. All of this stuff we're sharing because we're building alliances, we're using those team connections, and we're staying in touch with a variety of sources just to check in so that they know we're thinking about them. We're working with all of our clients that have any sort of B2C construct or even B2B, business to consumer, business to business. We're saying, have you reached out? Have you talked to people? And this is something that's a real critical piece. Access is also critical because you and your team now have information before other people have it, which means you have time to plan. It means you have time to position, you have time to message, you have time to communicate. This helps you to see not only the big picture, and the big picture in relation to what are the opportunities that are available that you folks can leverage in ways that will not only accelerate your value, give you some real lift and some purchase, but demonstrate your versatility, your flexibility, which immediately makes you more valuable to whomever you're working with. It also shows that you have momentum when other people do not. For remote teams that go silent, that don't have a lot of information flowing, it is a big question mark in everybody's mind exactly what they're doing. And are they actually worth the expense of maintaining them? Are they doing something business critical? You've got a question mark in people's minds. And so if you're not talking about it, then nobody else is going to talk for you. And don't leave this to someone else. Don't leave your fate to someone else. Really get that message out there. And that means that you have to be a good promoter for your people. It means that you have to go to the meetings and talk about stuff so that people know that you exist. And the perception is that you're a team on the move, even in crisis, and you're figuring out ways, you're problem solving. It gives you a voice in the process so that you can present ideas, so that you can now say, hey, to prep us for the future, we can play a role in this particular way. And while it may not ultimately save the situation because the company may be beyond repair and can't recover, it gives you a fighting shot. And that's really what we're talking about here. Give you and your team a fighting shot. Because part of what you're doing is you are providing a forum for talking about your team strengths, their talents, their value. And that means really every exchange that you have with everybody you're dealing with gives you an opportunity to say thanks to people. It gives you an opportunity to offer ways that your people can help, and it really positions you again for just being somebody that is considered business critical. Networks for remote teams in the best of times are their lifeline. And we're really talking about lots of different types of networks. And this is an important consideration because, nobody can exist in an operation effectively without having a good operational network that helps with day-to-day stuff. Just, particularly I'm based in Rhode Island, and we have this saying in Rhode Island, everybody in Rhode Island has a guy. We got a guy for that. So as soon as somebody says, geez, I need this, somebody says, I got a guy. And so, good operational networks are set up so that you always have a guy, a gal, a resource that you can go to facilitate things. Somebody has a technical issue in your team, you got a person that can fix it. Somebody has a customer problem, you got a person who can fix it. Somebody has just a personal need within your team, you've got a person who can fix it. This is an important concept. So operational networks are definite requirements for anybody who is managing a remote team. You also need strategic networks, and strategic networks are a little more sophisticated because your strategic networks might be strategic partners. They could be business alliances. They could be folks that you are aligning with because they've got something you need, you've got something they need, and so there's reciprocity. You're kind of working each other back and forth, and that's an important concept because this is what makes business run in the best of times, even if you're in an office, but in a remote situation, it elevates it so that you have people who could potentially become your team's advocate when you're not in the room. It could be decision makers who are impressed with the way you and your team operate, could be people that you're not working with now, but you'd like to work with in the future. So this is an effort on your part as a remote team member to reach out and to cultivate these relationships. Kind of hard to do in these circumstances, but it's not impossible. But yeah, gotta actually make an effort, and that's an important contingency here. Treat people with respect, act honorably, show that you're a good partner, and people are more likely to want to work with you. And then don't forget personal networks. And this is a really interesting consideration when you're working remotely, because personal networks, while are a great mental health support, they certainly stave off isolation. Appreciate that your personal networks can also be a great source of different types of business help that you might not anticipate, because these folks will help you because they like you and they're not your competition. Sometimes your strategic networks and your operational networks think of you as one role, but your personal networks may extend themselves and help you in ways that you didn't envision, because they do care about you in a different way, and they're distinctly out of your professional network, so they're not seeing you as someone that they have to go up against. In essence, it's a great untapped avenue that many people forget. And then finally, anytime you are in any sort of a remote team situation, networks in general, any sort of relationships in general, trying to move your team forward, practicing reciprocity, knowing what you have that's valuable to others, and whether that's an individual team strength, whether that is an expertise, whether that's connections you have, whether it's information that you've got that you can share, whether it's access to a system, whether it's knowledge, whether it's you're running a meeting and you can let somebody attend it, or you need to get into another meeting, but you have a relationship and that person who's running the meeting will let you in because of that relationship. Whatever it is, appreciate that you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back, is really a very productive dynamic when you're thinking about remote teams. So how do you build this stuff? Well, giving before you ask, and this is a really important concept, and it's one that we talk to all the organizations about when we're first starting to implement remote work programs, particularly when we're working with senior leaders who are managing remote teams, matrix teams, dispersed teams, because if you're only asking, but you never give, first of all, nobody's going to want to work with you because they feel like they're getting sucked dry and they don't get anything for it. But the other piece is, if you're always asking but you're not giving, it makes you look weak. It makes you look like you can't operate on your own, and you're more interested in operating off of someone else's effort. Always, 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 always in these circumstances, stay connected and build a plan to maintain contact. It's the only way you can keep your networks vital. And it's the only way that you can keep your ear to the ground and hear information, because as you're having these conversations, what might seem like a lot of work will always yield you good results as long as you stay vigilant and you're actually listening and you're understanding the implications what's being said to you. You're thinking about the information that you have in relation to what your goal is for your team and your organization. So with that, what I'd like to do is I'm actually going to end our slides and stop screen sharing. And I'm going to go to the group and ask the group if anybody has any questions for me. So I'm going to pull up the meeting chat. And we have one question already in the forum. Thank you very much, Bobby. The question is, would love to hear some examples of recognition programs. What kind of rewards are really valued and appreciated? And Bobby, I think that's a great thing, because I think that, if you're looking at that in terms of today's topic, one of the things that I would say to you is that if I were running a remote team and I was working within an organization, one of the recommendations that we have for all of our clients that are working remote teams is how can you look for official ways to get people recognized within your organization? And I think that sometimes that is, different forums that you have access to that allow you to be able to state that person's name out loud and really get them advanced for the work that they're doing. For example, I'll give you a very clear example of this. I literally very early today was on a live stream town hall with a healthcare system, and the CEO of that healthcare system is making an effort every single time that he is presenting information to specifically call out individuals by name that he has witnessed contributing in a particular way. And that's just one very easy, very specific thing where you're pulling people into meetings, and you are using time in each of those meetings to call out some of the contributions that individuals on the team have made, or that a group has made, because they have been moving things forward. Within organizations themselves, very often organizations have everything from, we've got different organizations, sales organization that has people all up and down the Eastern Seaboard. And so very often their team leaders will make an effort to use some of their group communication channels to give shout outs to individuals who have had particularly good days on their sales floor, or they are giving examples of different ways that folks are collaborating or extending themselves for their clients, and doing things that are really above and beyond. So not only are they coming up with individual ways to reward those types of performance, but they're also using it as a form of really elevating that behavior so that the rest of the team has somebody as a role model, and they're understanding what's valued within that team, or something that is valuable to the organization, because it also gives leaders a chance to really speak to the specific contribution that an individual's effort has had, and the overall impact that it's had on the organization. I think the other thing with remote teams is, and we have seen this time and time again with the folks, that we work with in many different segments, and this is particularly true for our life science clients, is that sometimes folks don't want a very public shout out, and yet they do appreciate having a private conversation with a more senior person. So we have one organization that has a direct line. There's the senior team has a direct line to the CEO, and the CEO actually makes video calls to individuals and checks in with them and says thank you. And so whether it's a virtual lunch arrangement where we have leaders who do virtual lunches with groups of folks just to check in with them and find out how things are going, because they've been asked in by the leader. Maybe they are presenting things from an educational point of view. We're doing some virtual leadership forums with a couple of our clients, and we routinely will invite senior leaders in so that they get to hear from that group. And so there's an exchange, and they get to know people that they wouldn't necessarily get to know on a routine basis. So we're finding that there's a lot of really good ways that you can do it. Some are going to be more public, because in sales organizations, people kind of like those public shout outs. In more conservative organizations, it might be constructed a little bit differently. So we do a little bit of both. Other questions? Does anybody else have any other questions for me? So we've got another question, and how often should you check up on your business network as opposed to your personal network? So Joshua, thank you very much for that question. And one of the things I would say to you is it's always a balance, right? Because you don't want to be a bother. You don't want to be a pest. You want to respect people's times, but you do want to stay connected. I don't think that it's ever been easier. I don't think that it's ever been more important staying in touch with folks. And there was a point in time where networking was conducted through paper Rolodexes. And I'm dating myself a little bit here, but for some of you folks on the call, there was actual physical Rolodex, and you'd give people a phone call. And today we've got factors like LinkedIn, or you might have Microsoft Teams, or you might have something like a Slack channel, depending on the construct of your organization. And so staying in touch with people and just doing kind of a quick reach out. And I'll give you a very specific example. We're working with a manufacturing company that has a dispersed team that they do high-end construction work. They they build beautiful stuff for very expensive homes, and they actually work all over the United States, and they're working in the Virgin Islands too. And so we obviously can't have them on planes right now. They can't get in cars and drive everywhere. So we're teaching them how to use video video conferencing tools like Teams, like Zoom, like Join Me, all of the video conferencing tools that are out there to connect with their clients, to just ask them if they're okay. And so a quick message is going to be really, really important. I would also argue that even with your personal networks, checking in with your neighbors, just checking in with people that you haven't had a chance to see for a while. Again, if you've got some sort of a social connecting platform, appreciate that a face-to-face conversation can be extended in ways, we call it O to O to O communications, online to offline to online to offline, where we could have an offline conversation that's a face-to-face. Then the next type of communication that I might have with you is via conference call or via an audio call. And in those forums, we're just, continuing some of the discussions that we had during the previous interaction. And so with our ability to be able to extend ourselves in new and interesting ways, where you have a face-to-face conversation, and then you have a digital conversation, and then you have the face-to-face, and you also have some passive interaction, because maybe you see something about someone on your LinkedIn newsfeed, and it gives you an opportunity to reach out to that person and congratulate them, or inquire about a new project, or check in with them because they're deliberately posting things, and those posts are showing up in your news feed, giving you an opportunity to reach out and connect. So there's natural ways to do it. And there's also planful and strategic ways to do it. What I would say is you can't just rely on digital, and you can't just rely on face-to-face, and you can't just rely on, actively reaching out. You have to do a little of all of those things. You got to watch the news feeds, remember your network when something interesting pops up. You got to use your digital channels, but you also have to be able to have those more intimate conversations, whether that's virtual and video conferencing the way we're doing right now, or whether it's doing something else. So other questions? Do we have any other questions today? Great. Well, we've kept these briefings short and to the point on purpose. We record every session. We're posting them online, and they're available in the public domain. We're going to be sending out the links to you, as well as every other person who signs up for these sessions, so that you have access to them and you can look at them at your leisure afterwards. We are doing the sessions every single Friday on purpose to give you an opportunity to be able to ask us questions, and also we want to provide as much information as guidance as possible to help you kind of get through this. Next week's topic, we're going to be talking about how are you going to keep your team spirits up, because everyone is weary. They're weary of FaceTime, the video screen time. They're weary of being in the house. All the extroverts want a hug. So what are some of the concrete ways that our clients are using to combat this, and what's the advice that we're giving to people? So with that, we're going to wish you a very good weekend. We hope that you're safe and well, and we want to thank you so much for coming to today's session. Thanks so much. Take care of yourself, and we hope to see you again next Friday. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.